All right, boys and girls, this is Math Message 3-8, and in this math lesson, we're going to represent data using a scaled pictograph. Now, yesterday we worked on a bar graph, and we really talked about setting up the scale for that bar graph so that we could fit all of our data in. Today, we're going to do the same thing, but instead of bar graphs, we're going to be looking at pictographs. Now, when we make a bar graph, our data is represented with bars. But when we make a pictograph, what do you think we're using to represent our data? We're using pictures, right? All right, so here's what we're going to do. I need you to turn in your workbook to page 81. And yesterday we used some data where we gathered data from sorting shapes. And so I'm going to have you go ahead and on the top of page 81, I'm going to have you go ahead and fill in that table with the data from yesterday. So 14 triangles, 12 wide rhombuses, 10 narrow rhombuses, 5 hexagons, and 8 trapezoids. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that. All right, so now we are going to start to represent this data in a pictograph instead of a bar graph. Now, a lot of times, boys and girls, when we see a bar graph, most of the time, our bars are going like this. So we'll have bars, and they're going vertically, okay? They're going up and down. But a lot of times when we see a pictograph, our data is going to go horizontally instead. So it's going to kind of flip that graph around. So we're still going to need to title this graph. Okay, so think about what this graph is about. Think about what it was about yesterday. Okay, we were sorting pattern blocks, right? So that's still going to be the title of our graph. So go ahead and fill in your title of pattern block sort. All right, if you need more time, always pause the video. All right, so now, instead of putting all of our categories down at the bottom of our graph, like all of our shapes, we're actually going to put our categories over to the left-hand side. So we're going to fill in our triangle and our wide rhombus. Go ahead and pause the video and get the rest of those filled in. All right, so I went ahead and finished filling out mine, so you should have all of your shapes off to the left. Now, we're going to start filling in this data, and this time the data is going to go horizontally instead of up and down vertically, okay? But with a pictograph, we're going to represent the data with pictures, not shading in bars. So we have to choose a picture, something that we can easily draw that's going to be able to represent our data. Now, our data is about shapes, right? So it probably only makes sense that we choose to do some kind of shape. Now, in the years past, some boys and girls have decided that they wanted to draw triangles for triangles and wide rhombuses and narrow rhombuses and hexagons. But I'm going to tell you, it gets a little hairy trying to draw all of these shapes. So we're just going to pick a very simple shape that we can draw for each of these. Okay? Now, something that makes pictographs a little bit different from bar graphs. In a bar graph, we represent our scale off to the left-hand side with numbers going up the side. Okay, so I don't know if I still have, let's see if I still have my bar graph from yesterday's lesson. Let's see if I can pull one of those up here. Oops. Well, maybe. Okay, so in a bar graph, my scale is over here to the left-hand side, and that's what I'm counting by. Okay, I set up my scale, and then I make my bars as tall as they need to be. Pictograph is a little bit different because we have to set up our scale with our pictures. Okay, so I'm going to choose a simple picture to draw. Boys and girls, I'm going to just draw simple squares because I just think that that will be just kind of the simplest thing to draw. So I'm going to draw squares for each of my shapes. You're going to put this down here in the key. Just like, have you ever looked at a map? Maybe in social studies class, we're going to be working on some mapping skills this year. There's always a key so that when you see different shapes on a map, you know what that shape represents. So each square is going to represent our shapes, but we got to decide what we want our scale to be. Just like with a bar graph, we had to decide, are we going to count by twos? Are we going to count by fives? Maybe by ones, by tens, by hundreds? We got to figure out what we're going to count by. Now, when we did this bar graph, when we did this same data on a bar graph, we counted by twos, didn't we? Remember that, no, on this one we counted by tens. On the other one we counted by twos. You're going to think I'm a little bit crazy here going back and forth. Remember yesterday we counted by twos on our bar graphs to fit that data in. Let's see if that would work on our pictograph. So if I counted by twos and I needed to represent 14 triangles, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, I'll be able to fit that in. So here's what I'm going to do. Down here on my key, I'm going to say that each square represents 2 shapes. 2 shape blocks. Okay? And now, boys and girls, I'm going to fill in my data using these pictures. So I had 14 triangles. I'm going to count by twos because remember my scale is counting by twos. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. Okay, now go ahead and pause the video. I want you to go ahead and get the rest of your data filled in. Okay, I went ahead and filled the rest of my data in, but I left the hexagon blank because the hexagons, we're going to have to do something a little bit different. So remember, each of these squares represents 2. So when I need to represent my 5 hexagons, I'm going to draw 2, 4, but if I draw a whole nother square, that's going to be 6. I only need to represent 5, so I only need 1 more. So here's what you see a lot of times in a pictograph. You will see me draw a half of a square. And what I'm going to do is I'm not even going to draw this other part here. Okay, I'm just going to kind of leave that open. So that way you can clearly tell that I am representing a half of a square there. Well, if 1 square equals 2 shapes, then a half of a square would equal 1 shape. Now, this looks exactly like our bar graph, except now we're representing our data horizontally and we're representing it with pictures instead of bars. We're still going to be able to answer the same questions. We're still going to be able to answer questions like which of the shapes did we have more of? Well, we can step back and we can clearly see that we had more triangles. You know, which shape did we have the fewest? Well, we can step back and look that hexagon is the fewest that we had. I can still answer questions like how many more? If I want to know how many more triangles I had than wide rhombuses, well, I know that I have 14 triangles and 12 wide rhombuses, and I can subtract those 2 numbers. Or I can clearly tell that, well, this is the only one not filled in, and each of these spaces is worth 2. So I had 2 more triangles than wide rhombuses. Okay, the biggest thing, guys, you have to remember is this down here. Your pictograph is going to have a key. You're going to have to decide what do you want your picture to be and what do you want each picture to represent. You're going to have to choose your scale. Do you want each picture to represent 2, 4, 5, 10, 1? You have to choose your scale. All right, now let's go ahead and go on to page 82. And we're going to look at another pictograph. Now it says that Kellogg School held a weekend car wash, it wants you to use the data in the tally chart and the key to complete the pictograph below. You may refer to page 193 and 194 in your student reference book. Now, you don't have that at home, so don't worry about that. You're not really going to need it. But I'm going to look at this tally chart. Now, I see that this tally chart is about the numbers of cars washed. I see that we're looking at Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then I've got some tally marks that shows how many cars were washed. Okay. Now, down below, they have started my pictograph. They've got the title, number of cars washed. They have the categories off to the left instead of at the bottom like they would with a bar graph. And now they have their key. Remember, this is the most important difference between a bar graph and a pictograph. We have a key. They are using rectangles, and each rectangle is going to represent 4 cars. So you've got to remember that. Okay? Now, boys and girls, I want you to go ahead and pause the video. I want you to see if you can go ahead and fill in the rest of this pictograph. All right, so let's look here. For Friday, they already had Friday done for you. Friday has, when I count my tally marks, there are actually 8 cars that were washed on Friday. So if each rectangle represents 4 cars, I've got 4 here and 4 here, so 4 and 4 is 8. Okay, now I don't have to put numbers in there. I'm only using the pictures. All right, so let's look at Saturday and count my tally marks. I've got 5, 10, 15, plus 1 more is 16. So I need to represent 16 cars. So you should have filled in. Remember, you're counting by 4s. So 4, 8, 12, and 16. Now, boys and girls, I'm going to give you a very big piece of advice. I'm going to do this wrong for a second and show you what we teachers do not like to see. I don't like to see this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? What's different from the way I did it just a minute ago? Please make sure that your pictures are nice and lined up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I want to make sure that my pictures are nice and lined up so I can really kind of see, can really kind of match those up as I'm looking at my data. Okay, all right, now let's look at Sunday's data. We have 5, 10 plus 4 more is 14. So I need to represent 14 cars. So you should have drawn 4, 8, 12, and then when I get to that last one, I need to do just a half of a rectangle because I only needed 2 more. Okay, these here started looking a little bit more like squares. Sorry about that. It's not the easiest to draw on a smart board. All right, so just remember, if you need to represent just half of that, then you can cut that last one in half. Since you only needed to represent 2 cars, you would just draw half of that picture. Okay, now the question number 1 says, why are there 2 rectangles next to Friday? Well, why are there 2 rectangles next to Friday? Each rectangle represents 4 cars, right? And so I need 2 rectangles to represent 8 cars. And then number 2 says, how did you figure out how many car symbols to draw for Sunday? So what do you think? How did you know how many to draw for Sunday? Okay, well, I know that 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12. So I drew 3 symbols to represent that 12. And I know I needed to draw a half a symbol to show 2 more cars. And then let's look at, let's see here. Is that all the questions we got on there? Yep, that's all the questions that we have for that. All right. Boys and girls, along with 3-8, there's actually some more practice pages with 3-8 on page 84 and 85. And it's making sense of number stories. So why don't you go ahead and turn to page 84 and 85 and give those a try. And so pause the video, come back in a minute, and we'll go over some of those. All right, now boys and girls, just to kind of save us some time, I'm only going to go over problem number 1 and just to kind of give you an idea of what this was looking for. So we're making sense of number stories or word problems. Let's look at number 1. It says there are 4 crackers in each pack. You buy 3 packs and give 1 pack to your friend. How many crackers do you have left? Now, I like to read the problem and then I like to go back and I like to reread it again and kind of underline important information. It says there are 4 crackers in each pack. That's probably some important information, right? It says you buy 3 packs. So that's probably some important information. And you give 1 pack to your friend. Now it wants to know how many crackers do you have left. So that's what it's wanting us to find out. I always like to draw a little squiggly line on what I'm trying to find out. All right, boys and girls, if you know me at all, you know that when I solve word problems, I like to draw pictures. So I'm just going to become a math artist here. I'm going to go off to the side, and if they didn't give you any room in your workbook, but you can always get out a scrap piece of paper. It says there are 4 crackers in each pack. So I'm going to draw a pack of crackers, and I'm going to put 4C because I know there are 4 crackers in each pack. Now it says you buy 3 packs. Well, let's go ahead and represent 3 packs. Now each one had 4 crackers, right? And then it says you give 1 pack to your friend. So I'm going to take one of these packages and I'm going to give it away to my friend. All right, I just like to draw exactly what's going on. Now it says, how many crackers do you have left? So this is what I have left for me. Now it doesn't say how many packs, it says how many crackers. All right, so let's start answering these questions. It says, what do you know from the problem? Well, boys and girls, I know exactly what I just drew. Okay, I know that there are, I'm going to say, there are 4 crackers in a pack. I know I have 3 packs. And I know I gave away 1 pack. That's what I know. And guys, my picture shows that perfectly. Now, the next question says, what do you need to find out? Go back and look at your question. What do I need to find out? I need to know, and I got to kind of come down here. I ran out of space. I need to know how many crackers I have left. That's what I need to find out. Now it says, what is your plan? Well, I'm going to tell you. My plan is always to draw a picture of what's going on. So what is your plan? I'm going to draw a picture, which I already did. I'm telling you, when I draw pictures, it shows me exactly what I need to do. So it says, what do you do first? Well, guys, what did I do first in this picture? First, I drew 3 packages of crackers with 4 in each one, right? So I'm going to say, I drew 3 packs with 4 in each. Now, it wants me to write a number model for this step. That's the first thing I did, so let's write a number model for it. What would be the perfect number model for 3 packs of 4? 3 times 4 equals 12, right? All right, now it says, what do you do next? Well, what does my picture show that I did next? After I drew Drew 3 packages of 4, I gave a whole package to a friend. So I'm going to say I took away a pack of 4. Whoops. There we go. Now, what's the number model for this step? So I had 12, right? And then I took away, how many did I take away? I took away 4. So how many crackers are left? That's what I'm figuring out. So 12 minus 4 is 8. And it says, how do you know your answer makes sense? Well, if I'm giving away something, then I know that I'm going to have less than when I started, right? If I started with 12, is 8 less than 12? So yeah, how do you know your answer makes sense? I'm going to say I should have less crackers than I started with. Okay, and boys and girls, this is important because sometimes we might tend to add some of these numbers together when we're supposed to subtract, or subtract when we're supposed to add. And so it's important to kind of look at all the information you know and see what makes sense. Should my answer be smaller or bigger than what I started with? And that's going to help you to determine if your answer even makes sense. All right, so boys and girls, that is making sense of a word problem. I highly recommend draw a picture. If you draw a picture of exactly what's going on step by step, that picture is going to show you what you need to do with those numbers. All right, go ahead and do page 85 on your own. We're going to call it a day on lesson 3-8.